This Friday, Cuba received a donation of medical supplies from China to support the fight against the coronavirus. The epidemic curve does not appear to be flattening in the United Kingdom, as millions of low-income workers remain exposed to the COVID-19 virus. South Africa has been praised for its handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Katrina Goss. This Friday, Cuba received a donation of medical supplies to fight COVID-19 from China. This was the first flight chartered by Havana to transfer essential supplies for the prevention, control and treatment of the COVID-19 virus. The cargo includes face masks, protective suits, test kits and devices to transport test samples. 40 Chinese entities prepared the donations of medical supplies to help Cuba, which continues to face wide-ranging limitations due to the US blockade. The Attorney General of Brazil, Augusto Aras, has requested the Supreme Federal Court initiate an investigation into President Jair Bolsonaro following accusations made by Sergio Moro before presenting his resignation from the position of Minister of Justice and Security. Moro, the former judge who led the political persecution against former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, leading to his imprisonment, accused Bolsonaro of political interference in the federal police after the president removed the director of that body, Mauricio Falexo. The Attorney General asked the Supreme Federal Court to call the former minister to testify after Moro claimed that there was fraud behind the dismissal of Falexo and assured that Bolsonaro wanted to have access to confidential intelligence information from the federal police. The court already has an investigation into Bolsonaro open, also following a request from Aras. The number of COVID-19 cases and fatalities continues to rise across Latin America. Brazil remains the worst-hit nation with 3,407 fatalities and over 51,000 positive cases. This Friday, Ecuador significantly raised the number of cases to 22,719 and confirmed 576 fatalities to become the second most affected country in the region. Meanwhile, Peru has reported over 21,000 cases and 634 deaths, followed by Chile with more than 12,000 cases and 174 fatalities. They're followed by the Dominican Republic, Panama and Colombia as the countries hardest hit by the pandemic. Thousands of residents of the Peruvian capital Lima have abandoned the city and headed for other provinces to escape the economic crisis aggravated by the COVID-19 pandemic. The absence of employment opportunities, the high percentage of informal jobs, as well as the collapse of the health system have seen Peruvians move to inland areas. The lockdown that started on March 16th has led to increasing poverty in the Andean country, the second most affected by the coronavirus in Latin America, with almost 20,000 cases and over 500 fatalities. With the number of cases rising, the quarantine was extended yesterday until May 10th. A group of 129 migrants deported from the United States arrived in Haiti on Thursday. This is the second such flight to arrive in the island this month, raising concerns about the country's capacity to deal with an increase in COVID-19 cases. The deportees are being housed in a hotel in Port-au-Prince, where they're required to spend 14 days in quarantine. The group includes 50 children ranging in age from 5 to 15 years old. Haiti has so far reported 62 COVID-19 cases and 4 deaths.
Today we are in a difficult situation with the outbreak of COVID-19. It's clear the Haitian government has assumed its responsibilities by choosing to quarantine these people for a period of 14 days and to follow up clinically to see who are sick. And if we find anyone who is sick, we will send them to the hospital for treatment.
The Dominican Republic this Friday commemorates the 54th anniversary of the Revolution of April 1965, a civic military movement characterized by the active, militant and armed participation of the masses to return President Juan Bosch to power. Bosch was overthrown 7 months after being sworn in as constitutional president, the first democratically elected after Rafael Leonidas Trujillo's 30-year dictatorship. On Saturday, April 24, 1965, members of the armed forces loyal to Juan Bosch, who had been ousted in 1962, revolted against the de facto government led by Donald Reid Cabral. That event gave rise to a civic-military confrontation, which culminated on September 3, 1965, seeking to replace the 1963 Constitution, which established freedom of religion and expression, political freedom, the right to housing, as well as the return of political dissidents and those exiled during the Trujillo regime. The revolts led to the military intervention of the Inter-American Peace Force, headed by the United States and rubber-stamped by the Organization of American States, leading to the occupation of the country by the United States Army from 1965 to 1966. More stories coming up after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. The United Kingdom remains one of the countries worst hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. The government has been criticised for its response to the outbreak, with claims it was slow to impose restrictions, introduce widespread testing and supply personal protective equipment to frontline health and social care workers dealing with virus patients. Political analyst Carlos Martinez brings us more from London.
What we're seeing in Britain is that the so-called flattening of the curve really hasn't kicked in yet. Confirmed coronavirus cases have been rising steadily by around 5,000 per day, and that's been the case since around the beginning of April, so for over 3 weeks now. Similarly with deaths, which of course are a lagging indicator, COVID deaths have been averaging around 700 per day. So why isn't the situation improving when a lockdown was imposed on the 23rd of March, over a month ago? Going by what happened in China, we'd expect to have seen positive results by this point. Lockdown was introduced in Hubei on the 23rd of January. Case numbers peaked 2 weeks later, and by the 23rd of February, so a month in, daily new cases were below 500 and going steadily downwards. And that's about the time frame you'd expect. If you basically eliminate contagion through a lockdown, the virus doesn't get transmitted. You record the cases that were transmitted before the lockdown and that then become symptomatic, but you've cut out new transmission. The difference in Britain, and I think in the US as well, is that the lockdown is really a semi-lockdown. Millions of people are still having to go to work because the government isn't guaranteeing their income or their job security. It isn't closing down non-essential workplaces. And so on the one hand, you've got a section of the population that's able to work from home or to stay off work, that isn't exposed to the virus. On the other hand, you've got a section of the population that is going out to work, that is exposed to the virus. So if you like, it's a sort of apartheid. We've got herd immunity for low-income workers, and that's the reason why we're still recording so many new cases. And it's also the reason, by the way, that the virus is hitting black and ethnic minority people so much harder. What the British government needs to do is to stop tailing Trump's absurd line of blaming China and instead put every effort into securing PPE, testing millions of people, procuring respirators, procuring and distributing masks in their tens of millions, and guaranteeing basic economic security for ordinary people. Without all this, the situation simply isn't going to improve anytime soon.
Spain has recorded almost 370 COVID-19 deaths over the past 24 hours, representing the lowest number in 4 weeks. Meanwhile, the Spanish government has confirmed that the state of emergency will remain in place for 2 more weeks until May 9th.
Today we have a total of 2,796 new cases compared to yesterday, an increase of 1.4%. That's the best figure we've had in many weeks. But not only that, I think there's another data that must be valued together, and that is because it's the first day that we can announce a higher number of healed people than of new cases reported. Today we have 3,105 new cases cured, which means an increase of 3.5% compared to the previous day.
Firefighters and sanitation workers in the Italian Alps are using snow cannons from the ski slopes to spray disinfectant around local villages to prevent the spread of COVID-19. As a number of new coronavirus cases has begun to decline in Italy, the country is preparing for phase 2 of the lockdown, when restrictive measures will be eased and people will begin to return to normal activities. In preparation, across the country, cities and towns are developing plans for maintaining social distancing on public transport and in public buildings. Italy is one of the worst hit countries by the pandemic, with over 190,000 cases and more than 25,000 fatalities, the highest death toll in Europe. Health authorities in Berlin started testing nursing staff and rescue service personnel for COVID-19 using a drive and walk-through testing centre on Friday. According to the health department of the district that started the initiative, the aim is to carry out a strategic expansion to be prepared for mass swab tests after the reopening of playgrounds, daycare centres and schools. Upon arrival, people collected swabs from their own throats, assisted by health workers wearing protective masks. The aim is to quickly identify infected people and isolate them to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. Germany has reported over 154,000 COVID-19 cases and more than 5,000 fatalities. Emergency services in Russia are continuing to battle wildfires that have destroyed dozens of buildings in villages in Siberia over the past few days. Fires have spread through fields and forests on the back of a heat wave which has hit the entire region. Temperatures in Siberia are around 15 degrees Celsius higher than normal for the time of year. Russia's vast stretches of forest have frequently been hit by major fires in recent years. According to Greenpeace in Russia, the number of wildfires has increased by 20% since the start of the coronavirus lockdown, in part due to city dwellers escaping to the countryside.
To protect the towns, we summoned the forces and resources of the Federal Firefighting Agency, the Ministry of Defense, and volunteer firefighters. As a result of our clear and organized actions, we were able to prevent the spreads of the wildfires into the towns.
Japan's emergency medicine organizations on Friday said emergency medical care in the nation has begun to collapse, with many hospitals turning away patients who have fever or other symptoms of the novel coronavirus. The Japanese Association for Acute Medicine and the Japanese Society for Emergency Medicine held an online news briefing and called for increased testing to facilitate the transfer of patients to appropriate medical facilities so that emergency rooms can be freed up to treat non-COVID-19 patients in a critical condition. One health facility reported it was providing its staff with one surgical mask every 2 days and one N95 mask a week. Japan rates as one of the 10 worst hit countries in Asia, with more than 12,000 cases of COVID-19 and a death toll of over 300. Chinese health authorities this Friday reported that the last critically ill COVID-19 patient in the worst-hit Chinese city of Wuhan has recovered, while the existing number of confirmed cases in the city has dropped to 47.
On April 23rd, the number of confirmed patients in Hubei has for the first time dropped to below 50, and no new confirmed or suspected case was reported over the past 20 days in a row. The number of important cases has reduced gradually in the past 10 days across the nation, but there are still related indigenous cases reported, so we need to identify the whereabouts for the confirmed cases, suspected cases, and the close contacts to remove potential risks. We have just received the information that the last severe case was cured today in Wuhan. The number of severe cases in Wuhan becomes 0 today.
And we're taking one last break now, but stay with us for more stories. Welcome back to From the South. Today marks the 27th anniversary of the death of South African anti-apartheid icon Oliver Tambo. The politician and revolutionary served as president of the African National Congress from 1967 to 1999. In 1943, Tambo, Mandela and Walter Sisulu founded the ANC Youth League, with Tambo becoming its first national secretary and a member of the National Executive in 1948. In 1955, Tambo became Secretary General of the ANC after Sisulu was banned by the South African government under the Suppression of Communism Act. He returned to South Africa on December 13, 1990, after over 30 years in exile and having been elected national chairperson of the ANC in July of the same year. After suffering complications following a stroke, Tambo died on April 24, 1993, at the age of 75. His death came 14 days after Chris Hanni's assassination and 1 year prior to the 1994 general election, in which Nelson Mandela became the president of South Africa. And South Africa has been praised for its proactiveness in combating the COVID-19 virus since it confirmed its first case on March 5th. From widespread testing through to a record number of recoveries, analysts have noted that the South African approach could serve as a model for the continent. The economic measures rolled out by President Cyril Ramaphosa have also been classed as some of the most comprehensive across Africa. Ramaphosa is also the current chairperson of the African Union and thus has the delicate task of juggling national priorities with those of the continent as a whole, as Africa seeks global support to combat the pandemic. The number of coronavirus cases in Ghana has now surpassed 1,000. Following the confirmation of 125 new cases since the last tally was released on April 22nd, the total number has now reached 1,279. The previous increase was 112, the first since the lifting of a partial lockdown. Ghana is sub-Saharan Africa's third most impacted country by the COVID-19 virus, behind South Africa and Cameroon. At least 18 people, including 12 rangers, were killed on Friday in an attack in Virunga National Park, a UNESCO World Heritage Site in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. This was one of the deadliest attacks in the park, Africa's oldest and most biologically diverse protected area. According to local sources, about 60 militiamen ambushed a convoy of civilians that was being protected by the rangers. Africa's oldest nature reserve is a popular tourist attraction known for its population of mountain gorillas. According to a statement, the guards were not the target and died while assisting the civilian vehicle that had been caught under fire from the attackers. There was no immediate claim of responsibility, but a Rwandan rebel group was reported to be operating in the area. People in Egypt are celebrating Ramadan despite the restrictions of the COVID-19 pandemic and a sandstorm that further clouded the first day of the month of fasting. However, residents of Cairo said they are struggling to maintain high spirits this Ramadan. Muslims have found themselves cut off from much of what makes the month special as authorities fight the pandemic. Egypt is the most affected country in the African continent, with over 4,000 confirmed COVID-19 cases and almost 300 fatalities. The Egyptian government has banned public gatherings, including prayers at mosques. The cabinet announced on Thursday that a nightly curfew will begin at 9 p.m. instead of 8 p.m. as of Friday, the first day of Ramadan. The J. Paul Getty Museum in Los Angeles challenged art lovers stuck at home to publish photos of recreations of their favourite masterpieces, and the response has been massive. The challenge inspired an Instagram account devoted to showcasing the new artworks. Users are only allowed to use free daily objects to recreate any of the works that make up the museum collection, one of the most important in the world. And we finished this news brief with some of the resulting images. Remember, you can get all the latest news on our website and social media accounts. For Telly English, I'm Katrina Goss, and thank you for watching.